Hey, it's Tom and Mike from Take Time to Travel.
Cartagena is a very Instagrammable city with lots of interesting things to see and fun things to do. During our 3-month stay, we found some things we didn't like. So today, we're going to share with you our opinion on some of the city's negatives.
Now let's start with the really aggressive street vendors. In Central and out on Boca Grande Beach, you'll notice a ton of really persistent street vendors. This got really annoying really quickly. Now, most will just stop if you tell them no, but there were a number of them who will continue to follow you, trying to get you to buy something, even after repeatedly telling them, no, you don't want anything.
Now, this really took away from the relaxing beach atmosphere since there were so many street vendors. You couldn't go 2 minutes without somebody asking you to buy something. It got to the point where we didn't even like going down to the beach, which was too bad because that was one of the main reasons that we picked Cartagena in the first place.
There were also street rappers who would come right up to you and start rapping in your face and follow you down the street, and of course want money afterwards. We had one particularly bad experience where a single street rapper followed us for blocks even though we told him about 50 times we weren't interested. Finally, we ducked into a shop and he waited out front for quite a while before eventually leaving. Now, most of them will just stop when you say no, but there were quite a few who were very persistent.
We also noticed that there were a number of scams in Cartagena, whether it was the excessive pricing for foreigners or them purposely giving you back the incorrect change, the regular taxi scams you'll find everywhere in the world, or even the Ubers here were pretty scammy. They would add some phony charges all the time, and you'd have to go back to Uber afterward to get it fixed.
Another thing that we didn't like in Cartagena was that the infrastructure wasn't the greatest. You would frequently see the streets flooded with smelly water. And during our stay, we had a 3-day water outage which affected most of the city. This was obviously not the best. On top of that, we had about half a dozen power outages, which usually lasted about half an hour or an hour, but it was still not too enjoyable.
As for service at restaurants, it was pretty bad, like the worst we've experienced during our travels. You'd go to an empty restaurant and you'd still have to flag down the waiter for every aspect of your meal, from placing your order to grabbing the bill. Now, some restaurants had much better service than others, but in general, expect to wait a long time for your food and have to flag down the server for everything, and then automatically have a 10% gratuity added on top anyways.
Just getting a SIM card for a cell phone also took a ridiculously long time, like an hour for some reason.
We also noticed pretty terrible service at the grocery stores as well. We couldn't believe how long it took the cashiers to do anything. They would just stop and talk to each other, in general just work very slow, and somehow turn a 1-minute transaction into like 5 or 10 minutes. Additionally, the produce at the grocery stores was not very good either. Things like bell peppers, broccoli, cauliflower, and tomatoes were very poor quality, even at the higher-end grocery stores. However, things like mangoes, papaya, watermelon, and avocados were much better quality than what we were used to.
Grocery store prices were also more expensive than we thought they would be. We shopped at many of them during our 3-month stay, ranging from cheaper ones like Tiendas Era to higher-end stores like Korea Supermarket. A lot of things like canned goods, sauces, meat, fish, wine, and cheeses were very expensive. In a lot of cases, more expensive than in Vancouver, British Columbia. We definitely thought prices would have been lower.
We also thought that accommodations would have been much cheaper in Cartagena, but they were fairly expensive during the high season. For example, we normally search for monthly stays on Airbnb, and for a decent 1-bedroom apartment in a good area, you could easily spend between $3,000 and $5,000 Canadian dollars per month, and you could definitely find places much more expensive than that. Now, you can obviously find places that are cheaper than that, but we found the prices kind of crazy.
Another negative is that we found Cartagena quite loud. Cars would be constantly honking, there's party buses going by, and lots of barking dogs. Honestly, we found it quieter in the area we stayed in the megacity of Bangkok, than where we stayed in Cartagena, and Bangkok has more than 10 times the population.
Now, safety was also a concern. We didn't have any problems while we were there, but it was a concern that was always present. We left any high-end brand name clothes at home, didn't wear any watches or jewelry, and always traveled with a little bit of cash and a few cards, just in case anything happened. Additionally, we had to be extra careful when we had our phones out or our camera when we were recording.
Another thing we didn't like in Cartagena was the visa situation. We ended up paying about $85 Canadian per person to enter the country, which we found out about just before we left Canada. And because we stayed more than 60 days and just under 90 days, we had to pay an additional tax of about $45 Canadian each just to leave the country. We always do a lot of research before we travel somewhere, and we couldn't find any information about this departure tax anywhere. Honestly, it felt like we were scammed and left a bad taste in our mouth. $130 each for visas to Colombia is one of the most expensive in the world.
Overall, we're glad we got to see Cartagena. The old town was very pretty, as are the picturesque streets of Getsemaní and the incredibly beautiful Rosario Islands. But we wouldn't go back, and we would not recommend Cartagena for a longer stay for digital nomads. It's best for a short-term visit like a few days or a week to check out its top attractions. To see the many positives of Cartagena, make sure to watch our Best Things to Do in Cartagena video. And remember, take time to travel. Catch you on the next one.